Afternoon, everyone. Happy Monday. How is everyone? So, I mean, obviously the Tory Party conference is going on. The Tory Party still exists for at least another year. So, I just wanted to go through. There's the biggest speech on their economic policies. Now, this is. I mean, they've done some fairly mad things in this conference. They've been announcing policies. I mean, you can sort of tell the rails, the wheels have fallen off Kemi Badenoch's wagon because. So she's been leader for almost a year. It was literally only a few months ago, half a year ago, let's say, that Kemi Badenoch was under fire for not having policies, and she said, we're going to develop these policies over the course of this parliament, right? Which in a way is fair enough, but you still need some, right? Even Starmer, I mean, he made it clear he would be developing those policies over a period of years. But Labour still, it's not like they were a blank canvas when he started. They had some policies because there are some that are just obvious, right? So she came under fire for insisting it was going to take her 2 years to be able to announce these policies. So it's just under 1 year through, and apparently she's fine now. I mean, that sort of tells you any long-term plan she had is out the window. I don't believe she actually had one. But in terms of the plans, because I'm not going to criticise her for having policies, that would be a mad thing to do. But the actual policies are insane. I mean, I talked a little bit about yesterday about how the fact that she's just trying to sit on Nigel Farage's lawn is a fairly bad idea. But this austerity that was announced yesterday, was it? Well, they've updated it today. They've been updating their ideas today. But they sort of announced it yesterday. It's £47 billion worth of cuts. Now, I know that's not as much as Reform UK, but Reform UK, they've gone through, absolutely through all of them. So they've said, for example, £23 billion from the welfare bill. And you think to yourself, okay, so, I mean, there's a sense in which, yes, I keep saying, and this is the same with Labour, welfare is it's not a popular form of spending because anyone who doesn't themselves get it, like, resents others getting it, because the welfare bill is absolutely huge. The Department for Work and Pensions, which is like the most unpopular department, it's basically a department, if you're, let's say you're an MP in the party of government and the Prime Minister says, oh, how would you like to be the Secretary of State for the Department for Work and Pensions? The answer to that question is always, unless you're desperate, no thank you. No one wants that job. It is always, when times are good, when times are bad, when times are indifferent, it's a poison chalice, it's a terrible job, no one wants it, right? So fair play to people who actually pick it up, unless they're just desperate. Like Ian Duncan Smith took the role at one time when his career was basically over, for example. And it's because, so the budget's really large, so it has a material impact on people's taxes. Like if you take the Department for Culture, for example, like some people might not like spending on culture, but we don't actually spend very much on culture. If you were to work out the percentage of your tax bill that goes on the Department for Culture, it'd be nothing, because we don't, it's nothing, it's pennies, and not even many pennies. Whereas if you worked it out for the Department for Work and Pensions, it'd be quite a big chunk of your tax bill. So people resent it, and yet it covers a lot of people. It's not like this small group of people that are getting it. It covers, for example, most of it is pensions, state pension, so that's pensioners. So what the Tories have announced here is, so when you think to yourself, oh, that £23 billion from the welfare bill, so how does that break down further? Some of it's pensions. They're taking the state pension off people. Can you imagine that? They're going to take the state pension off people. Now, you think to yourself, well, that'll be a bit of a vote loser. Now, that particular one, the way they think they're going to get away with it is because they'll be taking it off migrants, for example, who've been working, because remember, you don't get the state pension until you've qualified for it anyway. So these will be people like EU citizens, for example, who've been living here for like 10, 20, 30 years or whatever, working, paying their dues, paying their national insurance. And the Tories are saying you're not going to be allowed the state pension, or indeed any, because that's what one of their things is. We're not going to allow anyone who's not a UK citizen to have access to any welfare payments, which would be absolutely disastrous for the economy. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? And then the other thing is, they said, so Mel Stride, who's their shadow chancellor, said, we could reduce payments to those with lower level mental health issues. So basically, we're going to take benefits, we're going to take welfare benefits off people with mental health issues. Because he says lower level, but who says what's lower level? Because we don't actually have effective diagnosis of mental health issues in the NHS. So who decides what's low level? It'll be back to what the Tories did used to do in the DWP, where they get someone on minimum wage with a 2-page PDF to go down a checklist, and they will diagnose them, because that's what was happening under the Tories. You know, doctors were being ignored when it came to medical issues and barriers to work. It was like, no, this person who's had no training and works for minimum wage, and the Department for Work and Pensions will decide based on their two-page checklist. Sometimes not even a 2-page checklist. I think this is the death of the Tories, maybe not officially, but it's done now. Resurrection is possible if they don't bring in January. I honestly, I don't think there's any, like, well, okay, interesting, there is someone else. The Guardian, I won't be able to find it now. The Guardian did a piece on someone else. I've not really come across her before. She's a shadow junior minister, but apparently she's ticking a lot of the boxes of this as well. But no one's talking about, I don't think the moderate Tories are there anymore. Or if they are, I think they're, you know, you have to accept pragmatism in politics. The problem with a lot of moderate, whether you're left or right, moderate people in general, is one of the things that makes you moderate is you understand the need to compromise, right? So the problem that exists in the Conservative Party, well, you get this in other parties as well, but it's a particular problem in the Conservative Party over the last 10 years, is they've been trapped with one group of compromising Tories and another group who refuse to compromise. And what it has led to is this real tilt towards extreme politics in the Conservative Party. And I think now the situation is, any moderate Tories remaining there have long since accepted that their party has to be extreme to survive. Even though I would say the opposite. This is mad. You think about the different things they're doing. It's IDS over again. This is worse, because IDS was just rubbish. He was just rubbish. These are rubbish and insane. You know, they've got... so she says she's not just going to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. She's going to tear up international treaties. All international treaties. So she's basically said, in not so many words, but the trajectory is this. She's going to withdraw the UK from all international laws. Basically, when her government wants to do... Well, she's not going to get a government, but you know what I mean? You know, in this hypothetical future. In her government, there's going to be... you know, she's going to want to do a thing, and then the courts will say, oh no, there's this international law. She will withdraw from that treaty, which includes UN treaties. Now, how can a country... Because I bet, again, it's like Farage. I said this about Farage, but, you know, you say the same thing about Badenoch or any Tory. Are they talking about giving up our seat, our permanent seat on the Security Council of the UN? And if they say no, say, so how can we in all conscience retain that seat, that permanent seat on the Security Council, if we do not even sign up to UN treaties? Because the UN Security Council, its job really is supposed to, I mean, we know, there's a lot of politics involved, but its job, I mean, what is the purpose of the UN Security Council? Ultimately, it is to make sure that countries follow international law. That is basically its job, isn't it? It serves no other purpose. It's supposed to be there, and again, we know it doesn't do it consistently because politics, but it's supposed to be there to make sure countries adhere to international law. If we don't even sign up to those international laws, then, you know. So on Times Radio, Mel Stride said EU immigrants are exempt from the benefits restrictions. Oh, did he? So which immigrants aren't exempt then? I didn't see that then, apologies. So which ones aren't exempt? If EU immigrants are, who's not? Commonwealth immigrants, are they not? Or would he say, you know what, because remember, Commonwealth migrants in the UK get more rights than EU migrants. If you're an EU citizen, but not a UK citizen, if you're just an EU citizen, if you're an Irish, if it's different if you're Irish. So let's say you're a citizen of a continental EU country. You don't have the right to vote in a general election. But if you're Australian, you do. Now, here's where it gets really weird. So you could have been living in this country. You might have, to coin a phrase, indefinite leave to remain, right? ILR. So you may be a French citizen who's been living in the UK for 30 years, but you've retained your French citizenship. You have indefinite leave to remain. I mean, you've been here for 30 years, for goodness sake. So that's fine. You can stay here for the rest of your life. You've been here for 30 years. You probably are going to stay here for the rest of your life. But you don't get to vote in a general election. But if you're an Australian who's just over here for a couple of years working, you don't have indefinite leave to remain, you can vote in a general election. I mean, that's a bit mad. That's why I am a big supporter of the fact we should have EU citizens being allowed to vote in general elections. And people will say, well, it's not normal, you know, most countries, it's not like we're antiquated on this. Most countries do not allow foreign nationals to vote in their national elections. This is perfectly true. But we do allow foreign nationals to vote in our general elections. We do. If we didn't at all, I would say, well, fair play then, because it's just like other countries, it's fine. But we do allow foreign nationals to vote. It's just that we allow an Australian who's only here for a couple of years and they're intending on going back to Australia, they can vote. But a French person who's been living here for 30 years and intends to spend the rest of their life here and have the legal authority to do that, they're not allowed. It's mad. They can vote in local elections, but they can't vote in, nationals. So yes, the most moderate Tory votes have gone to the Lib Dems. The problem for Tories is that if you're an uncompromising MPs, why don't they just go to reform like to happen pre-election to cause panic? Yes, because this is the thing. Like, the Tories haven't moved on from the Rishi Sunak strategy, which was a failed strategy, but it had some hope. What Rishi Sunak did, it obviously didn't work, and it was never going to work. But there was a kernel of strategy within it. So what Rishi Sunak did is his strategy was, we're going to cover, they basically looked at the problems that Reform UK were claiming to solve, right? Just like Labour are doing now. They're going, okay, so there's these problems that the public think exist, right? Some of them do exist, some of them not so much. But nonetheless, we're going to cover those bases. So we will address them. But we may not address them as robustly as Reform UK, but we are going to address them, so we're going to improve the situation. But when it comes to voting, Reform UK cannot win power, we can. So basically, Rishi Sunak's offer to the public was, do you want us to do some of what you want, or do you want to vote for Reform UK and get none of what you want because Labour will come in? That was the appeal. And it's not, in theory, hypothetically, that sort of appeal can work. It's just that the way Sunak applied it was brainless. And Labour are doing the same thing, so they're not going to cancel indefinite leave to remain, but they are, for example, making it take longer. So it's going to be 10 years rather than 5, which I'm not at all happy about. I don't think that makes sense. But you can see what Labour are doing. They're saying, look, we're not going to get rid of indefinite leave to remain, but we are going to make it more difficult. We're going to put the extra English language requirements in. Same with asylum. We're not kicking people out of the country. We're going to process asylum claims properly, but we're not going to have them in hotels, and we're going to do this, that, and the other. So Labour are doing the same sort of thing. What they're doing is, Reform UK light in some areas, but they are also trying you can choose to either, we'll address the problems in our way, or you can vote for Reform UK and not win at all. But again, that's not going to work. When they were forming these ideas, this strategy a year ago, Labour probably thought that was fine, because Reform UK won a large share of the vote, but they won like 5 seats. 5 seats. And they've only still got 3 of them now. They've got an extra one, and then it's weird. How many MPs they got now? They've got 5 MPs. I keep forgetting, because they had 5 MPs, then they lost one, then they got one back, then they lost one again, then they got one back by a defection. So they've got 5 MPs, but it's 5 different constituencies. Or 2 of the constituencies are different. It's already weird. But anyway, so a year ago, Labour may have thought, they could still play the same game as Sunak, maybe just do it a bit better. But even that's not out now, because people think that Reform UK can win the next election. I don't think they will, but people think they can. But it completely fails with the Tories. It's a non-starter, because the Tories, like Labour, can come back with when delivery becomes evident, they're going to come back a bit. I don't want to say, is it going to be? Oh, it will all be fine, but they are going to come back, because the delivery will be evident in a couple of years, hopefully over the next year. The Tories can't deliver. The Tories can only make a better argument. That's all they can do. All they've got is words. And their words are, we're going to be like Reform UK. Well, why don't we just vote Reform? That's what, if I was asking Kemi Badenoch, journalists in this country are shit, Do you know what it's like? I see on social media, whenever a journalist asks a searching question, they always get massive amounts of praise for it. And it's because once every few months they ask a proper question. They're absolutely shit in this country. And it's because it's not that there aren't any good journalists, it's just that the good journalists aren't allowed to ask the questions. They should be asking Kemi Badenoch, talk me through this, Kemi. How does this work? Tell me, what is the difference between you and Reform UK? Because Reform UK are the ones who are most likely to form the next government. So anyone who's between, choosing between Reform UK and the Conservatives is going to vote Reform UK. So tell me how you're different. I'd like her to answer that question. Can you think of any Labour MPs who might defect to Reform if they think they're in a hopeless situation in their constituency? Oh God, any number of them. I'm not. I have a very dim view of most MPs. There's plenty of Labour MPs who want to stay Labour MP, or they want to stay MPs, I should say. Sorry. Oh yeah, lots of MPs just want to be on the gravy train. If they think Reform are going to win their seat, they'll defect to Reform. I'm not going to name any specific ones. There's probably a couple we could probably name. I'm not going to name any specific ones. But what I would say is, let us imagine that in a couple of years' time, Labour really were on course for losing, and Reform UK were still in a really strong position. It looked like they were going to. Labour MPs will defect. I guarantee it. They will. So yeah, Tom's there saying, don't think it's an issue now. It might be in 2 years. Yeah, if Labour haven't retaken, or if they haven't got themselves on a decent trajectory again this time in 2027, Labour MPs there'll be one at first, and then there'll be another one later. There will be defections, because loads of MPs, they're very malleable. They just want to be MPs. We really don't, and there is no real. I don't think there is a better system of selecting MPs really either. It'd be lovely to think if only we could come up with a system that meant that we had. Because I don't like defections at all. I have a very dim view of that. I don't care. It's amusing if a Tory defects to Reform UK or vice versa or something like that. Yeah, that's fun. But I don't like it even then. I don't think it's honest. I think if you because even though I'm not one of those who says when an MP defects they should, trigger a by-election. I never say that, because I understand our system is to vote for a candidate. You're voting for a candidate, not the party. So I get that. Constitutionally, that is the situation. However, we do vote for parties. I vote for the party. I vote for the party is listed by the candidate. I vote for the party box, not the candidate box, even though it's the same box. And so do a lot of people. So I always take a dim view of anyone who defects. I don't welcome anyone who defects. But there will be Labour defections if Labour don't, come back. But I think they will. Trevor there saying about Badenoch, she may have policies but no details. Well, there's some details here though. Even though, so they say they're gonna bring civil service numbers down from 517,000 to 2016 levels of 384,000. So that sounds like, oh yeah, we'll just get it down to where it was before, and we were fine before. But it's like, but they don't understand. Well, they do understand because they're the ones who hired these extra civil servants. Those extra civil servants are needed to deal with Brexit. There were things that the European Parliament used to deal with that we now have in-house. That's sovereignty, right? We've got more sovereignty. We decide more things for ourselves. Well, that means we need more civil servants to action those decisions. So these are civil servants, over 100,000. How many is she talking? Like 133,000 civil servants. That's like a quarter of the civil service. Sacking a quarter of the civil service. And so you first of all think 133,000 paychecks instantly disappearing from the economy, the local economies where they spend them. So imagine what that does to... This happened when George Osborne got rid of a load of civil servants, and it wasn't even this many. He got rid of a load of civil servants. What happened is, all of a sudden, you create extra unemployment, you remove those pay packets from local economies, so local businesses struggle, so businesses go under, and you create this cycle, this spiral of doom. It's an utterly ridiculous situation that only right-wing nut jobs can come up with. Don't get me wrong, left-wing nut jobs can come up with their own batshit stuff, but this is daft. And the thing is as well, I can go on and on about how economically it's a really bad idea. Forget it. It doesn't matter. All Tory ideas are economically bad as far as I'm concerned. It's the fact that who in the current climate, when austerity is... You go down, you ask anyone in the street, ask anyone you like, do you think we should have more austerity? You won't find people saying yes, unless you happen to go down Millionaires Row. You won't find anyone saying yes. And yet she thinks that's going to be a big vote winner. Well, what about redundancy costs? Well, there's that as well, yeah. But they will think that's fine because redundancy always costs less than the wages. Like if you can... The reason why companies will make people redundant if they really do not need that labour anymore is because it's cheaper to make someone redundant than carry on paying them for the next few years, isn't it? So they won't worry about the redundancy costs. That'll be baked into their savings, won't it? But it's the fact that those civil servants are doing a job. They're delivering something. Some sort of public service. That's why they're called civil servants. They're delivering some sort of public service that is going to stop. So they're going to get rid of 133 people who are doing something, which means they won't be doing it, which means it won't happen. So, and then the reason why we have more than we did in 2016 is because Brexit first of all, it created a load of extra red tape, which means you need more bureaucrats to deal with the extra bureaucracy. But also, there are things... because again, they talk about sovereignty. Oh, we want sovereignty. We want to decide these things for ourselves. Right, well, that means you need more civil servants to deal with them then. Because once you've decided a thing, you need civil servants to actually carry it out, don't you? Absolutely insane. But just the idea of austerity, just the idea of saying, do you know what we need? We need super austerity. £47 billion cut from a 5-year budget. It's like nearly £10 billion a year. That is an insane amount of money. Like I was saying there, yes, reform won't win on the condition MPs don't shit the bed. I'm worried they will post Welsh Scots elections and force Starmer out? How likely is that Labour loses badly and MPs force Starmer out? I really couldn't tell you because, like I say, most MPs don't really understand anything. I mean, yes, we could have done with the Welsh and Scottish elections a year later, admittedly. It's not looking good. Labour are going to fall away badly in Wales. I don't actually know. I need to check on the Scot. Let me have a look at the. Hold on. Let's see if we can find some opinion polling, because it's not like Labour were in a stunning position after the last Holyrood election. So it may not be disastrous in Scotland. Let's have a look now. Let's see. Sometimes the wiki page has. For goodness sake. Oh. Let me have a look. Sometimes the wiki page has opinion polls. So when are we talking about? Yeah, it's not good. I mean, they might. I honestly couldn't tell you if Labour are going to lie. They need to just keep their eyes on the prize. A lot of them probably will, because by next spring, I mean, the Employment Rights Bill will be passed. It will start to come online. But yeah, Labour could certainly do with fighting back a bit better. They need to fight back a lot better. And I know there was some anti-Farage speeches at the conference. They made a big deal about that. But they need to carry it on. I still don't think they're committed enough. There needs to be some needle. Like, Starmer has this view, or maybe Labour in general have this view, that the public don't want to see their government like in a gutter fight. But I actually don't think they mind if you do it in the right way. I mean, we know they don't, because it works. It works for Farage. I mean, although he's crying like a Karen about the way Starmer regarded his policies, Farage is much, much worse when he's like attacking people. And so's Trump, and these people do fine. Trevor, they're saying, yeah, you only get a pension if you have sufficient contributions. So if they're not going to pay pensions to those with leave to remain, they're going to have to refund those contributions. Well, of course they won't. But yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is, for people to qualify for these things, it's contributions based. Actually, most benefits are contributions based. Like even unemployment. If you're unemployed and you have to go on unemployment, the process for you. If you have two people, let's say you have someone who's never worked or not paid it, and you have someone who has worked for very many years and then becomes unemployed, the process is very different. So when I was unemployed, for example, many years ago, thankfully now, because I'd been working for years, I was in a much better position than someone else signing on the same day who'd never worked, Considering Labour MPs don't do regicide, is Starmer pretty safe now? I would hope so, because in all honesty, I mean, I'll be the first to call for him to go if I think there's one, someone better, and two, if I think. But I think, you look at the polling at the moment, because the thing is, the MPs don't read polls. They look at the polling as analysed by the Tory media or other media that is anti-Labour, right? But what does the latest polling actually says? The public, by some margin, prefer Keir Starmer to be Prime Minister than Nigel Farage. Well, often elections, first of all, Labour MPs need to know, and I hope they're aware, but they need to know, the reason why Labour are in dire straits now, yes, their messaging has been bad, yes, those missteps were really stupid, but ultimately it's because people haven't seen the positive delivery. But it is there. They know it's there. They've been voting for it, for goodness sake. So, and then the other thing is, in an election, although we don't have presidential elections, but it often, for a lot of voters, comes down to who you want as Prime Minister, which is one of the reasons which is keeping Kemi Badenoch in place. They don't want to have another revolving door leadership thing, because it's like, when people vote for you, a lot of them are voting for the leader, and they want to know that that leader is going to be the leader for the long term. So you don't, it's not a good idea to change leaders mid-parliament unless you've got a desperate need to. And so you've got this twin issue of the fact Starmer is still polling ahead of Farage, right? When you do it properly, when you do a proper head-to-head, who do you want as Prime Minister? Starmer comes out on top. If you do personal popularity, sure, Farage comes on top. And then some people, because they don't understand polling, then read into it, oh, people must prefer Farage to Starmer. No, because there are more people, and the reason is there are more people who would vote against Farage than would vote against Starmer. Starmer's unpopularity at the moment is because people think he's not getting anything right, and when he does something, he gets it wrong, right? So basically his fortune at the moment is tied to his governments. So as long as you believe that the government's making broadly the right decisions, then with some exceptions, then again that as soon as people see that delivery, his standing will go up as well. Now if it doesn't, then get rid of him, but you don't have to get rid of him now. In fact, to be honest, if you're going to get rid of a prime minister, you can do it with as little as a year to go. You look at 2019 when they got rid of Theresa May. They had an election 6 months later and won it hands down. Massive majority they got. Not as big as Labour's now, but it was still it was a very large majority they won. 6 months later, from being like third and remember when in the last days of Theresa May, the Conservatives and Labour were below the Lib Dems and Brexit Party in the polls. There was like a four-way split, but Brexit Party and Lib Dems on top. So there's absolutely no sense in getting rid of Starmer. If they do, then Labour because the new leader won't be able to do anything different. They can't do anything different, otherwise they'll be breaking manifesto promises. And because a new leader comes in and then changes everything, all the ministers and stuff, you instantly derail all of the stuff the government's doing. Right? And you look chaotic while you're at it. It'd be a mad thing to do. Can I guarantee they're not going to do it just because it's a mad thing to do? No, because MPs are mad. But it is what it is. MR then saying, going back to Badenoch, if she said, vote for me to get rid of people who look like me, she'd be on to a better vote winner. Yeah. Don't think she really wants to be leaning to that, though. But I really don't get this pro-austerity drive. It's utterly insane. It's so out of tune with the public. Utterly insane. And literally promising to take pensions away. Madness. Sorry, am I missing something? Oh, recent poll has Starmer at 34%, Farage at 35%, who would be best Prime Minister. This is amongst just over 6,000 voters, though. Yeah, 6,000 is more than if you don't need that many, but that's not the case. What I'm saying to you is, right, Lahai, this is the problem, and it's because journalists, political commentators don't understand statistics. What you're talking about is a poll of people who approve of Starmer and who approve of Farage, right? That is not the head-to-head. Because in an election, people don't always vote for what they want because they know they can't get what they want. So a lot of people vote pragmatically for what is the best on offer. So when you go into an election with Starmer and Farage, when you ask the question in a poll, which one between the two would you prefer as Prime Minister, then the reliable poll, which is YouGov, by the way, again, if you're referring to some bullshit poll, then I can't help that. There's plenty of shit pollsters out there. Then the most recent one, which is very recent, it's not even close, by some margin has Starmer ahead. So that is the fact of the matter is at the moment. People do not prefer Farage to Starmer when you look at decent polling. You say a new leader would have to have a snap election. No, they wouldn't. There would be calls for one. And there would be, every opposition party will say they have no mandate, right? They have no mandate because people voted for Keir Starmer, which is another reason why it would be a mad thing to do. They wouldn't have to at all, of course. You have no reason to. But you would straight away be on the defensive. Remember, so as soon as it's even announced that Keir Starmer's resigning or forced out, right, but he'd resign, he wouldn't actually drag it on. You've then got a period of no government, effectively. You do have a government, but then there's got to be a period of time where you know that the Prime Minister isn't steering the ship, and the media will take full advantage in a way that they didn't with the Tories, because the same thing happened with the Tories. You know, when they had their, you know, leadership election, transitioning from Theresa May to Boris Johnson, or Boris Johnson to Liz Truss, or Liz Truss to Rishi Sunak, although that was a much quicker affair anyway. There was no big thing in the news about, oh, there's no one really running the government, because in theory there's still a Prime Minister, but we know that he can't do anything because the next person could change it all, right? There wasn't really much of that in the media. It would be every day in Labour. And it would take Labour, even if they had a truncated leadership contest, it would take them 6 weeks to 2 months or something. And that's if they really did it quite quickly. So there'd be a lot of pressure on Labour MPs to congregate around a single candidate and get a quick succession and miss out most of the usual stages. It would be madness, utter madness. Anyway, last one here says, until a journalist asks how come someone following UK law by entering the country to claim asylum because this is what UK laws are illegal. The media as a whole are not going to do that, though. They're not going to educate people on the realities of asylum. So you have to work with that politically. You have to accept the fact. The media, even the media you might think are the responsible media, they don't see it as beneficial to educate the public on the realities of asylum. And from the point of view of the Tory media, it's because they don't want to. From the point of view of some of the more responsible sections of the media, because there are responsible sections, it doesn't get clicks. It's you're just going against what the public believe. So you have to work with that politically. And the way you do it is, asylum is such a small part of everything. You just have to remove the visible features of it. You know, Labour are going to have, I mean, it's quite mad, Mel Stride talking about, oh, we're going to save money by not putting asylum seekers in hotels. It's like, you're an idiot, mate, because there's not going to be asylum seekers in hotels by the end of this Parliament. So you're not going to save anything. So that will be removed as a visible source of asylum friction. The hotels thing will be gone by the end of this Parliament. Labour insists so, and have done recently. Whereas the small boats will still be an issue, and it will continue to be an issue until you set up safe routes. But the thing is, Labour are worried about the safe routes because it'll attract more claimants, I think. I mean, that's me speculating. They've never said so, but it must be. But then you think to yourself, but asylum claims are not visible. I mean, yeah, they show up on a graph. Everything shows up on a graph. People don't care about graphs, right? They're not visible. The small boats are visible. You can see them. Like, you can put, the Daily Telegraph's not going to put a graph on their front page very often. It doesn't attract lots of people, right? But they can put a picture of a boatload of Afghans. If you remove those photos, you remove a lot of the problem. So I would say it would be better for Labour to stop the small boats. Even if let's say we ended up with 50% more asylum claims per year, but none in hotels, none crossing the channel. You know, let's say you could get rid of those. That would massively make the issue, because it would shrink in people's, like, that threat. Those photos are used as I keep talking about this thing about getting people to see a threat. Asylum as a threat. Like, where's your images? If they're not in hotels and they're not crossing the channel, where's the threat? There's no image of a threat. And I don't understand why they're not doing it. I don't get it. But there you go. Poll is by jail partners polls. Yeah, they're useless. Honestly, almost every pollster is useless. They're all and I'm not making it up. They're shit. The only decent pollsters, the only good pollsters, are YouGov and Ipsos Mori. They're the only ones. There are some pollsters who do some interesting work, like More in Common, And theirs isn't bad. Like, and when I say, so how do you judge? Well, first of all, if you understand how statistics works, it's a bit like a food critic. They can tell the difference between a Michelin-starred meal and one that I've chucked up, right? Whereas maybe some people can't. But the best way to test them, of course, is they all did polling during the last general election, and then we had results. Well, whose results were closest? YouGov's. Ipsos Mori wasn't too far behind. More in Common was like second tier. So they weren't bad. They weren't on the level of YouGov or Ipsos Mori, but they weren't bad. Most of the rest of them useless. Delta Poll's useless. Jail Part's useless. Find Out Now. Oh, they're like the worst. No, the worst actually is. What's it? Let me have a look now. Let me just look up the people polling. People polling. That's it. The Matt Goodwin one. They are the absolute worst, but that's because I think they are deliberately fiddled. I think they are. So, you know how some people used to think YouGov were fiddled just because it was owned by a Tory, and it really wasn't. Because they published their full methodology, by the way. Top statisticians and political scientists say, yeah, this is all good. And we know it's good because the results are always closest. Like, for 3 general elections in a row, YouGov have had the closest, their MRP polls have been the closest to the actual result for the 3rd election in a row. So people polling was the absolute pits. And then Find Out, because Find Out Now is just crow's entrails. It's absolutely shit. They reckon they can do MRPs on the cheap. They can't. And the results proved it. But Jail Partners, they're no good either. Most pollsters, they can do commercial polling. If you want to do some market awareness or something, they can do that. I'm not saying they're useless for everything. You should never engage them. If you've got some commercial polling you need, but political polling is very difficult. It's very specialised, and very few pollsters, and it takes constant research. You basically need an R&D team to be constantly revising your things. Whereas a lot of pollsters just hire statisticians who just use cookie cutter polling methods. They don't work. They're absolutely useless. But it is a problem because these pollsters are still engaged, they're still commissioned, and people report on them. It'd be nice if people could look at it and go, hang on a minute, we've got these 2 polls out by the 2 different pollsters on the same thing, and they both give wildly different results. Ooh. But no, you put a poll in front of someone and people go, oh, they just treat it as fact. Really annoying. Deputy leader election seems to have completely fizzled out the country's collective imagination. Yeah, because you've got 2 boring people. Apologies to Powell and Phillipson, but I'm afraid they're not like, you know, neither of them have really made a name for themselves amongst the public while they were ministers. A lot of people don't really know who they are. So I was quite pleased when it came down to those 2 in a way, because I wanted there to be as little drama as possible. So, but that's no surprise to me. Anyway, we're going to... trouble with Find Out Now is they skew the averages. They do all sorts of stuff. What they try to do is they try and do it on the cheap. They say, we can deliver MRP quality polls at a fraction of the price. No, they really can't. They're not pollsters. In fact, I don't really regard them as pollsters because they don't actually poll. They try and base it on absolute the whole basis of it is an absolute nonsense. And the only reason they are not bottom of the heap in terms of accuracy is because the Matt Goodwin thing, I believe, I can't know for certain, but I find it strange because Matt Goodwin is a genuine political scientist. I mean, he's very biased in his work these days, but he is a political scientist. I find it difficult to believe someone like that can make a polling company that's worse than Find Out Now. And so the only conclusion I can draw is they're deliberately skewed towards certain outcomes. But there it is. Anyway, we'll have to leave it there. We've gone well over. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Hopefully we'll be back to some more interesting stuff. Unfortunately, it is going to be Trump, Reform UK, or whatever the hell's happening elsewhere. But there it is. Although I have got some good news. I've got some bad news in the video in 15 minutes time, but then I've got some better news because I think Reform UK are panicking you now. I think Reform UK know, despite their hype, obviously they're good at hype, but they know that they're peaking at the moment. I don't think they've got a plan to maintain their lofty position. I think they're panicking. But anyway, we'll leave it there. Thanks for coming, everyone. Have a great rest of Monday. Until next time, I'll see you later. I've seen that one, yeah.